Hi, I'm Julie Webb. Thank you so much for your interest in LitCentric Radio and for your purchase of Imogene's Antlers. It's one of my favorite books. I've loved it since I was a kid. I even remember watching the original Reading Rainbow episode, which tells you how old I am, child of the 80s. But today we're going to take a look at what we can do with Imogene's Antlers and the unique structure that it provides. There are some books out there like If You Give a Mouse a Cookie that people call circle stories because the story begins with the mouse asking for the cookie and we go through a series of events and it ends with the mouse also asking for a cookie. So we begin and end in the same place. Now I call Imogene Antlers a spiral story. I don't know if anyone else calls it that. I think I'll claim I invented it. But with a spiral story, it's very similar to a circle story where we start out with a particular problem or situation, we go through a series of events, and it seems like we're going to end up with the same problem, but instead, we don't end up at the exact same spot. We end up somewhere slightly different. However, it still feels like the story is going to keep going and it just slightly changes each time, just like the shape of a spiral. The ultimate writing task with Imogene's Antlers is for students to write a letter. Now this letter is going to be in the voice of the school principal. Now if you own the book or when you get your book, you're going to want to take a look at the page with the school principal. He is terrifying, he's ghostly and ghastly, he kind of looks like he's all washed out like a zombie. He's very frightening. Luckily I never had a principal like that growing up. But if he visited my house, I would be terrified. So the students already recognize that he is going to have a very angry, disappointed, scary type of a voice. And that's what they're going to experiment with this writing task. They're going to write a letter to Imogene, pretending to be this principal, and experiment with using his voice and the vocabulary and the tone that he might use in a letter to her. We're going to support students in writing this letter by generating this bridge chart together and giving them some of the language and ideas that they're going to need. Before we start, I want to point out a couple of things about this chart. In your lesson, you have these sticky notes that you can download and print. And I put them on 4 different colors on purpose. When I've done a chart like this, I often have to color code to help my students organize and navigate their way around the chart. If everything is the same color, it becomes difficult for some of my students to understand what part of the chart they're working in and to focus their attention. So I suggest using different colors. You don't have to, but I think it's a good idea. Also in this case, you'll notice that I've provided a lot of extra language support here. I have a sentence stem, a different one to match each of the categories that we have here on our chart. And then I've gone ahead and with students, we work together to fill out what we think should go in each of these categories. Let's take a look at the categories. First, in this letter, I want students to state their reaction. Now remember, they're the principal, so they're going to use some language that, how the principal feels. So the principal might say, this is disgusting, or this is unbelievable. I can't believe that you grew antlers, you're such a naughty girl, right? So I'm providing a sentence stem here. And the students have generated some of the language with me. Some of it I've provided or I've summed it up so I can actually expand students' vocabulary this way. Some of my more needy students will rely very heavily on these sentence stems and on some of the language on the chart. I teach students how to lift portions of the text, words and phrases to use in their own writing if they need that support. Students who don't need that support may use the chart to help them think of ideas, help them spell tricky words. Usually they get started using the chart and then they take off from there. The next category in the chart is describe the problem. In the letter, I want the principal to tell Imogene the problem that her antlers are causing. So he's going to say, your antlers are contagious, or your antlers are a disgrace, or your antlers are a nuisance. Now that's an example of a word nuisance. My students would not have come up with that on their own. I provided that language, and it's one that they can now experiment with a little bit in their oral language and in their writing. Our next category, tell her what you want her to do. He is an authority figure, so he should be bossing her around a little bit and telling her what he wants her to do about this antler problem. So he says, you need to stay home or go to the hospital or cut them off. My students used to tell me that one a lot. So we want him to have that authority and that particular tone, so that's where that language is coming from. And finally, in the letter, I want him to explain how he feels about this particular situation. I am disappointed in you. I'm frustrated that you are causing such a big problem. I'm fed up with your crazy antics. Okay? So we've provided several categories, lots of language for students to lift and borrow with their writing. If your students don't need quite this much language support, then maybe you don't provide them with sentence stems. Or maybe you provide a little bit less text ideas in there. Maybe you don't need to color code. That's up to you to decide because you are the expert of your own classroom. Some of your students may also need support in learning how to write a letter. If they haven't done that before and learned that format, you're going to need to create another bridge chart to help them do that as well. Thank you so much for your interest in LitCentric Radio and for being a loyal listener. Have a great day at school.